Spreaker Live Show, episode 51 for March 23, 2016. Welcome. Thank you for listening. My name is Rob Greenlee, and I'm the head of content, and I also run the Adore podcast network that's part of Spreaker. We're going to deep dive into Spreaker Studio for Desktop app for Windows and Mac today on the show. I have a guest with me, and his name is Mr. Alex Exum. I want to make sure it's pronounced properly on the show.
You got it.
Welcome to the show, Alex. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And so before we jump in talking about Spreaker Studio for Desktop, why don't you tell us a little bit about Alex? Who's Alex?
Sure. Well, I started a podcast back about 2.5 years ago now, and it was called, and still is, The Exum Experience. It was really in the beginning about positivity, health, fitness, spirituality, and, kind of self-help movement. A buddy of mine, Carlton, had these interesting telephone conversations with me that would go sometimes, 1-2 hours long. And I said, this would be a great podcast. There's some really good information here. So I just started initially recording the conversations just with recording apps and things like that. And once we did 2 or 3 of those shows, I just loved it. And I said, I really want to do my own podcast full time. And I started researching different platforms. I've done a variety of different platforms. There's many online. But I landed at Spreaker because it had the ability to broadcast live. And I'm a big fan of radio. And I always thought being able to broadcast live was the best of both worlds. It's a podcast, but you can cover live events and do things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do with a traditional podcast. And I'm now like 225 episodes deep with Spreaker. So I love the platform, and I've been using both the app and the desktop version pretty much the entire time. So I guess I'd say a fan. I'm a fanboy of Spreaker. How's that?
Well, it's actually fantastic, because I reached out to you because I saw you doing some really great stuff around doing kind of Spreaker software reviews and putting out some content in support of podcasts, because you are a user of Spreaker and like the tools. I'm a fan of the tools as well. I'm using them. I'm using the Spreaker Studio for Desktop applications. But you're based in LA, and
yes.
Have you been involved in broadcast radio? I know that you have some connection here recently with Low Power FM down in LA. What's happening with that stuff?
Yes, absolutely. That's really exciting. There's a new Low Power FM that's going to be coming to Long Beach, 99.1 on your FM dial. That's KLBP. And they were granted a license. And I've been hoping for something like this because there isn't a Long Beach station other than a jazz station here that's run by the college pretty much. So this opportunity just kind of, I don't want to say fell in my lap. I've been dreaming about it and pursued them. I read an article in a newspaper and actually called the president of the nonprofit who's getting it together. And you referenced the interview I did with him, which is the great thing about having a podcast. And the great thing about Spreaker, I'm on iHeartRadio. So that kind of gives you a little credibility.
Yeah,
people say, oh, iHeartRadio.
Yeah, it helps, definitely. Well, I'm seeing, some low power FM stations start up here up in Seattle. So
nice.
It seems kind of interesting that the commercial radio side is struggling right now to kind of find their way, and there's a few of the big commercial radio folks that may be coming into financial problems. But at the same time, there's these low power FM stations that are like hyper local radio, and it's just like it's really interesting. And I know a lot of them are thinking a lot about podcasting too, which I think is really interesting as well. I guess it makes a lot of sense. But it's just it's an interesting time for low power FM to be launching in the middle of this kind of this turmoil around broadcast radio and digital, with podcasting. It's just kind of an interesting time.
Absolutely. And I think podcasting lends itself very well to low power FM because you have a lot of people that are just talking into a microphone, and a lot of low power FMs are going talk. The reason being they have to have a certain amount of community programming. So it can't just be all music and syndicated shows like, the Democracy Now! Type. So I think it lends itself well to podcasting. And I think you're going to have a lot of podcasters who are interested in platforms like Spreaker because they want to have that streaming capability and to be able to do it remotely and things like that. And we talked about that in my interview with the president of the Low Power FM that's coming here. So
that's awesome. Yeah, so I wanted to also share the purpose of this show is to hopefully provide some entertainment, maybe. Share some powerful tips and tricks to help you maximize your podcast, your audio show on Spreaker, or frankly, any platform, really. We stream this show live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern from SpreakerLiveShow.com. The show can be heard in iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play Music. Please leave a review for the show. You can certainly reach me via sending an email to rob@Spreaker.com, and I can be found on Twitter at Rob Greenlee, and that's with 2 E's. And Alex, how can a listener reach you?
Sure. Alex at alexexum.com. I'm also on Twitter, twitter.com/alexexum, and at spreaker.com/exum, EXUM. So any is great for me.
That's great. That's great. If I use a question on the show, so if you send me a question or a comment or something like that and we reference it on the show, I'll send you a Spreaker I Love Podcasting t-shirt. So
I want one of those.
Oh, well, hey, I guess I got to send you one.
You're getting my address.
Your time out here. You're on the show. You're giving me your thoughts and comments. So I guess, Alex, you do qualify for a t-shirt.
I've seen those on the blog. They're nifty. I've seen you guys wearing them. I want one.
So are you a large or are you a medium?
I'm a medium.
A medium, okay.
Yeah, I'm working on my girlish figure here.
Okay. Awesome. So Spreaker does have a Twitter account. So if you want to tweet us, send a tweet to @Spreaker. And we do have a website. If you're not familiar with Spreaker, Spreaker.com, and that's spelled with an R. It's not speaker, it's Spreaker. And well, we do have a blog, blog.spreaker.com. Has great articles and Spreaker news up there. We currently have an article up there called The Pros and Cons of Working Remotely. It's basically an article about the Spreaker team that is scattered all over Europe. We have people that work for Spreaker in Spain and Italy, Germany, Lithuania, and little old me here in Seattle. And now Alex is a little bit of an offshoot, right, of the Spreaker team for this this podcast, and he's down in LA. So we're just world hoppers.
And I got to say, that article really spoke to me, Rob, and I'm sure it did, for someone like you who works from home. I actually put a very long comment on there, and that inspired a show that I did, which got quite a few comments on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. That's one of the great things about Spreaker, I think, is that there's actually a community, and there's other comments on there as well. I don't know if that wasn't Tanya. I think it was Anna who wrote that blog post. Mm-hmm. But that's the other thing I like about Spreaker, just to interject here. Some of the other blogging platforms and things are just that. They're just a platform. There's no real social aspect to it.
Yeah.
And with Spreaker, you can follow users. People can follow you. There's a comment section. There's the live Twitter function that you have on the app. So it's more social. Everybody knows, for the love of God, at this point, that everything's going social. I don't have to tell them that, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
To have that user base, like you don't get with some other platforms, I think is kind of a big deal. And anyone who's starting a new podcast, one of the hardest things is not having people listen initially, and getting that audience. So it's good to have that built-in audience where people can actually find you and find your show.
Yeah, exactly. And Spreaker is a little bit of an unusual platform, and I was going to go into a little bit more details on the scope of the platform here before we talk about the Spreaker Studio for desktop software. But this show is heading in a little bit of a different direction here, as far as we're going to break it up a little bit, do kind of more software how-tos, help you understand how to best use the Spreaker platform. So I'm still going to do some conversations with podcasting leaders in the industry, but, want to have Alex in here to help us kind of make it easier for you to understand what the powerful capabilities of the Spreaker platform can bring you to your show to make you more successful. The Spreaker platform does have tens of thousands of shows on it today. We have 121,000 shows on the platform right now. That's just on Spreaker. Of about 36,000 of them are updated on a weekly or monthly basis. So you can see that there's a lot of shows that are created and then people kind of stop updating them, but the content's still up there. And there's a constant churn, and that's one thing. I spent a lot of years running the Zune podcasting platform for a little company called Microsoft. I had about 40,000 podcast feeds on that platform, and it was just a regular churn of shows coming in and people subscribing to shows and unsubscribing. It was just really kind of an interesting flow of how people kind of move through content from the creator side to the listening side as well. So that just kind of gives you an idea. There's about over 6 million active users of the Spreaker platform, and that's like the Spreaker listening apps as well as the creation apps as well. So there's a lot of activity going on around the actual Spreaker platform. But if you look at the whole podcast ecosystem, there's a little over 325,000 podcast shows in iTunes today.
Wow.
And about 175,000 of those are active shows. The takeaway from this is that the 121,000 shows on Spreaker, not all those shows are in iTunes. There are shows that are created on the Spreaker platform that never get submitted into iTunes. They're just done as either live shows, live audio shows, or they're just done as purely streaming radio shows. And that's what's a little different about Spreaker. I mean, you look at some of our competitors like Libsyn and Blueberry and some of the other ones out there, most of those are just purely podcasting distribution platforms. They aren't involved in more kind of online radio type of activities. And podcasting today is adding about 1,500 to 2,000 new shows per month. And I'm talking about across the whole ecosystem of podcasting. So as you can see, these numbers are going to continue to grow. You know, it's not going to be too much longer before we get up to 375,000 shows in iTunes. You know, it's just crazy how fast this medium is actually growing right now. So any thoughts, Alex, on all that?
Yeah, that's a lot of growth. I didn't realize it was that much. You know, and I think that's one of the reasons to do something live, like you can do with Spreaker, is kind of a benefit because, you know, to be able to cover a live event while it's happening is huge. I actually haven't had that opportunity where something major broke. Like, let's say something here in Long Beach, we had an earthquake or some sort of disaster. That's where I think people would really shine with Spreaker because it's instant. I mean, you could be online broadcasting, and we all know how things go viral with Twitter and you know, YouTube even, any of these social media platforms. I think that's one of the things that I love about Spreaker. And I've done live shows, and it's great to see the feedback immediately, instantaneously, than having a podcast go up there and hoping people find it and listen. Yeah. I find that some of the people that are constantly broadcasting live. You could probably tell me, I don't know the numbers behind the scenes, but I see some of the people that broadcast live have a massive amount of engagement because they're constantly there. People want to hear something that's live and interactive at the moment, right? I mean, does that?
No, that's
do
exactly
the numbers
right.
show that? Okay.
Yeah, so there are shows on the platform that, I mean, like Beyond Reality Radio, which is a show that's done by the host of the Ghost Hunters TV show on the Sci-Fi Channel. Jason Hawes, who's the host of that show, does a live show once a week on Spreaker. And he's getting probably 2,000 or 3,000 comments in his comment stream during his 2.5 hour show that he does once a week. So there's a lot of interactivity that comes with some of these shows. Some shows don't get a lot of comments, but other shows get a huge amount. It just depends on the content, depends on the following that the show has, but it's wild all over the map. I mean, we had to adjust our whole server back in just to support Beyond Reality Radio because our commenting system wasn't architected to support the level of comments that these guys were getting in their show.
Oh, it was that fast and furious.
It was just coming in fast, and there was just so many of them, So we had to allocate more kind of cache room for their show on the servers to cache all that data because there was so much coming in. Oh, it is. I mean, it's a good problem, and we were happy to do it, but it was just really pushing our platform from a commenting perspective because nobody had really pushed it that hard before.
All podcasters wish they had that problem.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to have that problem right here on this show. Comment away, challenge our system. I want to see it. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into Spreaker Studio for Desktop, which is a fairly new product that Spreaker made here over the last couple months. We've been updating it on a pretty regular basis. I think we've kind of reached a point where it's kind of feature complete, but I wanted to do a deep dive, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing the deep dive right now is because it is feature complete. Sure, there's things that we'll do in this software in the future, but at this point, we think it's good to go for most of the use cases that are out there right now for podcasters. And if you don't know what Spreaker Studio for Desktop is, it's basically a free recording, live streaming, live 24/7 online radio streaming software client for Windows and Mac. It streams and records at 128K. It's easy to use. It supports pro users that are on Windows and Mac. powerful, simple features for beginners and pros. And I know, Alex, you've been using it for a while. What's your thought on it, just at the high level before we dive into all the features?
Sure. Yeah, I was a beta user, so I've been using this ever since they first started releasing this to the public. And I can tell you, it's definitely come a long way since the beginning. I tell people when they ask me about it and what do I use for my shows, it's basically a radio station app. You can pretty much do everything that you would need to do for an online radio station. Some people who have used Winamp, virtual DJ, those type of things will find this much easier and just really self-intuitive. It's very easy to use just right out the box. But it's basically a station in a platform. That's the only way I can ever put it to people, because there's other things you can do. We'll get into the auto ducking and, using Skype to take calls and that type of thing. But basically, you can create a playlist, you can connect your microphone, and you're good to go. And it couldn't be any more simple. And even for the newbie, I think you'd agree, Rob, you can't really screw it up.
No, you can't. And it's designed to give you all the features that you need to do the basic stuff. But it also gives you the features to do advanced stuff, too. But it's presented in a really simple way. And I think that's the key. It's a difficult line for software developers to walk, is to create software that's easy to use, plus it's feature rich. Working in software for many years myself, I mean, it's a difficult balance because there's always features that are complex, right, that frustrate new users. And so you have to know when to bury stuff in the settings area versus what you put up front, at the top level. And I think we try and work through those issues to really surface what people will use and need that's primary. And even just to give you an example of the range of this too. I mean, a beginner user can use this all the way up to, I talked to the guys from CNN, and they're actually using the Spreaker Studio for Desktop for doing all their remote recordings. So even the professional guys are using this because they're working with hosts sometimes that are not that tremendously technically advanced, that they just want to get in, record, get out, make it really simple. So even the pros can use this software, and they are.
I think that says a lot right there, because the audio quality is very good with this app. And any way you cut it, you need a decent microphone, I would say. But even using the phone app, which I've used, the audio quality is pretty good. I mean, I haven't had anybody ever complain about the quality. So
you can use this software. I mean, the desktop version doesn't obviously run on your iPhone or your Android Android device or your tablet, but you can get a version of the Spreaker Studio for your iPhone or your Android device or your tablet. Your iPad or whatever. It'll record right off of your phone's microphone, and the iPhone has a pretty good microphone on it, really. I mean,
the Samsung Galaxy that I have has an excellent mic. I mean, and people can hear some of the shows on my channel there, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. The fact that CNN is using it says a lot. I didn't know that, Rob. That's kind of it's a great endorsement.
Yeah, well, that's true. And those guys have recently really kind of fired up their podcasting activities, too.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, they've really upped their game and really doing a great job with it. They hired a guy that is a long-time experienced podcaster. His name is Chris Smith. I mean, he's been involved in the podcasting space as long as I have. So he's now kind of running that there. So those guys have a podcasting expert in their midst, which makes a big difference. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about kind of the more powerful features that the Spreaker Studio Desktop has. It supports up to 4 USB microphones plugged directly into either your laptop or your PC. You don't have to use a mixer with this software, and I think that's a really powerful differentiator that the software has. So you can select source inputs up to 4. If your computer has 4 USB ports on the side of it, which a lot of the desktop computers now do, you can plug 4 separate microphones in right directly into it, and it'll pick them all up. If you're using a tablet, like I use a Surface Pro that only has 1 USB port on it, you just get a little $29 USB hub and just plug that USB hub into that single port. The USB hub will have like 4 inputs, and you just plug the microphones into that, and it almost becomes like a cheap little mixer.
Yeah, and I haven't had any issues with drivers and having to download anything special. Sometimes you'll run into that problem.
Yeah.
But personally, I plug the mic in, and it just finds it and connects right away. So
yeah,
that's
I mean,
good news.
It's awesome. Now, granted, there's some other capabilities that exist. There's also another feature called CPU performance. It's like an adjustment that you can do, and that's in the settings area, that if you have a slower CPU, you can just set it to do the encoding at a slower rate. Because if you have a slower PC, but you have it set to encode at a higher speed, you can have skips and jumps and stuff in your recording. The CPU has a hard time keeping up, is what that is. So it does have the adjustment to adjust for older computers and still being able to run this thing. Let's talk about the Skype part of this. Have you used the Skype part, Alex?
Yeah, I have. And that was huge when that came out. I was sending emails to the support team maybe once a month. I know they were getting probably inundated with people saying, please give us Skype support. Everybody wanted to be able to do interviews with Skype. It's really a big deal because I don't know of any other platforms that have really kind of figured that out. It was really hard. At one point, you had to do mixing board. Like you were saying, you'd have to actually buy a mixer and do some complicated wire setups. So that was a really big innovation when it came to Spreaker Studio. And it's very simple to set up. I thought it was going to be harder than it was when I initially did it. And the audio quality is great. One thing I would say about that is if you're going to do video, and I know you know this, Rob, sometimes that will knock the audio quality down. So it's not, I have found when using Spreaker Studio, if my interviewee maybe has the video turned on and is using Wi-Fi and not a direct connection, it will cut in and out and you'll have some audio issues. But those can be easily avoided by using a landline, plugging directly in instead of Wi-Fi. That usually helps, and not using the video, especially if you're doing a podcast, right? You don't really need to see them unless you really need to share documents and things like that online.
Yeah, and if you want to use Skype as well as the Spreaker Studio desktop software, you probably need to realize that it'd be best to have a computer that has a little bit more power to it. So if it's a really old computer, you may have some issues trying to, just like you said, if you're trying to run video at the same time you're doing it, you may run into performance issues because you're trying to do a lot on one computer. To give an example, today I'm actually using a separate computer to have you come in. But if you have a mixer, which is great, I mean, a lot of pro folks have a mixer, which means that you don't necessarily have to use the Skype capability in Spreaker Studio. You just run it through a mixer and do a mix minus, and which is kind of a complicated lesson. Maybe we can walk through that someday in the future. But
is the audio quality any better? I haven't.
No, it's probably not
seen much of a difference from ones I've heard.
It's not going to be necessarily better, except for it separates the processing across two CPUs, so you don't have to two separate computers. So Skype can be a little bit of a resource hog because, I mean, like right now I have you on video. So
I'm running mine too as well.
I probably wouldn't want to run the video at the same time that I'm running the Spreaker Studio and Skype on the same computer, just because I don't want to have any hiccups or latency in the actual stream.
Sure. Yeah, I thought about getting a mixer. I actually don't have a mixer. I'm using a PreSonus USB audio box to plug in my condenser mic. It sounds great, and I've never had any issues. And like I said, the only issues I've had were the other people on the other end.
Yeah, there you go. It's always
not blaming them. They were great interviewees, rather.
Exactly. To get Skype set up in the Spreaker Studio, it's basically going in and clicking a little icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the software. It's like the Skype logo. Just click on that and it'll launch up a little pop-up that it basically enables you to download the plugin, and it just will install. And it's basically, for Mac, it's called Soundflower. It's basically an virtual audio plugin that basically enables your computer to communicate with Skype through the software. So it just makes those connections happen. And then on Windows...
They couldn't have made it any easier, Rob. I'm sorry.
It's tough. It's tough.
It's a big button.
Yeah, exactly.
That says connect to Skype.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't miss it.
On Windows, the connection is VB-cable, and it's the same thing as Soundflower. It's just one's for Windows and one's for Mac. So it's pretty simple. The other big areas of Spreaker Studio for desktop software is playlists, tracks, effects, and they're all customizable. You can add your own audio in there. You can create a playlist. You can create like a 24/7 radio station in this software as well, which a lot of people don't. Most people just create a playlist and they'll play some tracks, all that kind of stuff, and it has all the abilities to control the volume, the playback, and create like fader scenarios in your tracks and things like that. So you can, I mean, it was kind of a little bit designed for music to some degree, though I would recommend to be cautious of playing music in podcasts.
I ran into that problem in my early days.
Yeah, so it's really powerful if you have music or lead-ins or things like that you want to play that you have full rights for, which is not always easy to get unless you have actually a musician actually make it for you.
Yeah, and Rob, I should interject because I know a lot of friends that are DJs and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe you won't get sued if you play licensed music, right? Maybe you won't. You'll fly under the radar. But is it worth it?
Yeah.
Is it worth to put your neck out there and risk it? Because if they do come after you, it's like $10,000 per violation, and not just per song. Every time it's played, per the people who hear it. I mean, it is a crazy fine. There are very few at this point. Rob, 365 Live is gone.
Yep.
Radioomni's being sued. But there's still streamlicensing.com. Just get licensed and don't risk it if you want to play music. That's all I'm going to say.
It's even more complicated than that, because if you're making your show available as a download, then there are no licenses for that.
You have to stream live, and you can't make it available for download. Correct. You're right. It can't be on demand at all.
Yeah, so you can't actually make a podcast with licensed music in it at all. There's no license that exists for that right now, as far as for major label music today. So, so you can't do it unless you want to take a chance.
And there's public domain stuff that people can find that's out there that they can use that's available for that. But it just, because I would love to stream all the music that I love. I'm sure you would too. And it sounds like a great idea. I could stream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but you don't want that knock on the door that day.
No, you don't.
80 grand.
Definitely, definitely. The other big part of it that's really, really helpful to podcasters is the effects area.
Yes.
And what that is basically hot touch areas. So let's say you're using a tablet or even a touch Windows machine. You can actually just touch the screen in the area where you've dropped in the kind of the effect or the intro or the exit. Just like what I played at the very beginning of this show, that little sound piece that I had at the beginning, that was basically a touch point in the Spreaker Studio desktop software that basically triggered an 18-second audio track that played. So that kind of capability is there. You have up to, I think it's like 8 or 9 locations that you can just set up with pre-recorded audio segments. You just basically drag and drop them into the software, and they'll be there for whenever you want to use them.
Yeah, and that's great for sound bites and sound clips. If you're talking about something, I love being able to just drop in a quick clip or a quote from somebody, and then it's very quick and easy to do, and it's very intuitive on the tablet as well. This layout is pretty much the same for the Windows version as the tablet.
and I think podcasters can really utilize that, because I mean, it's within copyright fair use to basically, if you're trying to cover some discussion that's happening online, you can use a little clip from that, and it's okay. And then you can either talk over it or you can talk around it or those kind of things. I do that occasionally on this show. I'll play like a preview of a podcast or something like that. I'll play like 30 seconds or 45 seconds from a podcast, and then I'll talk about it before and I'll talk about it after, and it kind of adds some sound depth to your program, and it's kind of interesting for your audience to listen to. So like maybe you go out and record something outside in the real world, right? It can be like a little soundscape recording or something like that, and then you just drop it into the software and play it as part of your podcast. It just makes for, it's ear candy. That's what you want to make in podcasting. You want to make some ear candy.
It sounds more professional as well, I think. Yeah.
Yes, it does. And then in the software also has a chat window, so you can post comments back at people that are chatting while you're doing your show. It's more of a conversational chat area that's in the software. So as you're doing your show live, you can be multitasking.
And I think that would be great for, like we were saying, LPFMs. I was saying this the other day to the guy I was speaking with. Everyone's trying to get things more interactive. And what better way? If you were broadcasting 24 hours a day and that's your online stream, people feel like they have a voice. It's a lot more interactive for a community station like that, instead of of sending in an email or.
Well, and you can also take those comments and add some depth to your show. You can answer questions, all that kind of stuff. And that's what's actually really, really powerful about it. And then let's talk about auto ducking. That's a fairly new feature, and basically what it means is that if you're playing any kind of audio in your software, so I can actually give a little bit of an example here. It's actually playing, but it's not getting loud because I'm speaking right now. So that's kind of how it works. So you can talk over stuff too. So there's some use for it, especially if you're trying to play other types of things in the background.
I love it. Especially for intros, because a lot of the times when you're trying to speak into a microphone and you're playing the music and you're going down with the fader, you screw it up. Sometimes I'll just jam it down too fast. So with the auto ducking, it'll just come in. It always is at an appropriate level. You can adjust it as well in the features there, in the settings. But it's great because sometimes I'll have a long intro. I use different music, public domain music for a lot of my intros with my voiceover. So I'd like to be able to sometimes, if I'm going to do a live show and interview someone, just be able to come right in. And then when the audio ducking kicks in, I've only used it a few times. This is a fairly new feature. Mm-hmm. You can just fade it down really quickly instead of having to fade it down yourself. So I really liked it. When I saw that feature, I thought that was really kind of a big deal. If you're a one-man band like myself, most podcasters are. We don't have show producers, right?
Yeah, that's right. And you're doing it all on your own. Yeah.
And you're clicking, an article that you want to talk to them about. You have their bio. You have them on the Skype. And it can be a lot. So just having anything automated helps.
It does, definitely. It definitely adds more of a professional capability to your recordings, and that's really helpful. The software also enables you to record, like I was saying, so you can export that recording. What a lot of people do is they'll either upload it later, so they could record their show and then upload it at a later time, or they can upload it and have it publish at a different time, right? So that's the capability that the platform has to be able to date things into the future. Or you can just export it, do some post-production on it, and then upload it through the regular Spreaker publishing process. I use some software. I don't know what you use, Alex, but I use the Sony SoundForge Audio Studio 10 for Windows, but you can also get it for Mac as well. It's like $59 for Windows and $120 for Mac. What kind of software do you use to do any post-production, or do you do much?
Yeah, currently I'm using PreSonus Studio One artist version.
Okay.
I did use Audacity when I first started out, but I got a free.
It's free software. Yeah.
Audacity's free, and actually PreSonus they have an artist version that's free as well. The only problem is you need to export in WAV unless you have a certain plug-in there. So then I bring it in Audacity to export to MP3 because that's what I need for Spreaker. But the reason I like to do that, I like to put a little what I call pixie dust on my audio afterwards. So I'll do a little compression, a little reverb, and then upload it. You can't do that, obviously, when you're broadcasting live. So if I'm using one of these platforms, I don't. I do like to, and also just because I'm kind of as I've done this for a certain amount of time, I'm a real stickler for good audio. So if I smack my lips too much or I pop, I like to go back and quickly take it out if I have a chance.
No, it's actually great to be able to do that. And I'll basically export that MP3 out, and then I'll drop it into the Sony SoundForge Audio Studio 10, and I'll do some editing on it, and I'll save it into a WAV file. And then I will run it through a software program called Levelator. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically a really simple software that was made actually back in the early days of podcasting, actually, to level and boost and normalize your entire show so it's all consistent in volume level. Because, I mean, a lot of times you'll record something, you'll be further away from the microphone, and you'll be closer again, and you'll be further away, and you'll be closer, that kind of thing. And what this software will do is it'll just basically level all that stuff out. And then also boost your volume. And that's another thing you have to think about as you're a podcaster, is you want to make sure your volume's good, because there's a lot of people listening to your podcast in noisy environments. So they're listening on the bus, the train, the airplane, all these places that in the car, which can be noisy as well. And you need to have good volume for them. Else they'll miss part of what you say. They'll miss part of the show. They may get frustrated and turn it off. So it's really important that you have very good volume levels in your podcast. I mean, a lot of people don't really realize that or think about that. as they record. And sometimes it's hard to tell because if you have your speakers turned up loud, it may sound like it's got good volume on your speakers, but maybe most people on their cell phones don't have a lot of audio boost.
Yeah, and we all tend to go down as we end a sentence, and Levelator helped me with boosting that little end inflection up. And I'm glad you mentioned that. For people who need something that's free, that's a great little program to make your audio sound better.
Free and is good. Free, all free.
Free's always good. like the free version of Spreaker, folks. That's why I always go to Spreaker if you want to start a platform, because you can do it for free. You don't have to pay.
Yeah, that's true. I wanted to kind of wrap up this segment talking about the Spreaker Studio for Desktop by just recommending that you can use some fairly low-cost microphones with this. I actually, for all my remote recordings that I do for the Spreaker Live Show, I use the Audio-Technica ATR 2100 USB microphone. It's a cardioid dynamic USB XLR microphone that has got a headphone jack on the bottom of it and a volume control. Plus, it also has a XLR output and a USB output, so you can plug directly into your tablet or your computer, or you can plug into a mixer. So it gives you all the capability that you need to actually get a pretty professional recording. You'll find, though, that the XLR input will actually record a little bit better quality if you go into a mixer. So it's just kind of the nature of USB versus the XLR. It's a little bit better quality sound, but it's pretty inexpensive, $59. So you can pick that up at Amazon. It's a great solution for especially remote recordings, but also just in your home studio. I would recommend it. Is that a mic that you use, Alex?
No, but that's a great sounding mic for $59. I gotta say, exactly. It sounds pretty good. Yeah. I bought the Blue Spark microphone. It's made by Blue. It's an orange.
Blue's a good brand. Yep.
It's pretty good. I did a ton of research, Rob, before I bought this microphone. I'm just one of those people. Before I buy anything, I check all the reviews. And this was one of the highest reviewed. They did a quality test with a voiceover artist. He used this one, another like $2,000 microphone, and then one that was like something I'd never be able to afford, like, a $5,000 or $6,000 mic. And they all chose this one, a $200 Blue Spark microphone. Wow. So I recommend this to anyone who is in the $200 range. I'm thinking about getting the one you have for my second mic now, because yours sounds really good. I thought you were going to say it was more than mine. So.
Oh, well, the mic I'm using here is the Shure. It's an SM7B microphone.
Oh, okay.
And it's about $350.
Okay.
Pretty expensive microphone. The other microphone that you can get is the Heil PR40, which is about $300. But those require an XLR input, which means that you wouldn't be able to plug these microphones directly into the Spreaker Studio software without having to go through an audio kind of conversion that will go into a USB port. So,
the Audio Technique goes directly into the USB?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The Audio-Technica ATR 2100 has a USB or XLR output.
Okay.
It comes with cables for both, so you can use it with a regular mixer, or you can use it directly into your computer. So it has both of those jacks on the bottom of the microphone itself.
Nice.
And I did kind of wanted to mention that Mackie has a Blackjack 2x2 USB audio, like a 2 microphone unit that supports XLR jacks.
Oh, okay.
That will use a USB port to plug into your computer, so you could use an XLR microphone it's $159 for this Mackie Blackjack 2x2 USB kind of recording. It's like a little mixer box, but it just supports 2 XLR inputs that goes into a USB port that will go into your computer. So.
That's basically what I'm using. It's a audio box USB, basically the same thing. It's only got 2 mic jacks and then the USB that goes into the PC. Very easy to use for people who need a quick, easy setup. So,
well, Alex, this has been fantastic. I hope we've been helpful to people listening to this. I know it's a little longer than the normal Spreaker live show that I do, but it's not too much. It's in the right range. This was a little bit of an experiment for us.
You have to learn to cut me off, Rob. I can get a little chatty.
And I think you did fantastic, Alex. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
To talk through this, and I think we'll just have to do this a few more times.
That sounds great. I'd love to be here again.
Please let us know what you think about this new format. We definitely want to hear from you, and I'll send you a T-shirt if you give me some good feedback. And I appreciate you listening to the Spreaker Live Show today. And Alex, how can they find you on Spreaker to hear your shows? Spreaker.com/Exum, that's EXUM, or you can go to alexexum.com. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com. Guess what? /AlexExum. So any of those ways you can find me. That's a big surprise.
I'm all over the place, Ralph.
Yes, you are. And thank you for listening to the Spreaker Live Show. Please give us a rating in iTunes. Even give us a comment on the Spreaker Live Show page. That would be fantastic. We definitely want to hear from you. Send me an email, rob@spreaker.com, and visit us on Twitter as well. And I'm on Twitter, too, @RobGreenlee. So thank you so much for listening, and come back next Wednesday for another edition of the Spreaker Live Show.